The paramedic pressed the phone against my ear, while the ambulance screamed down Yonge Street. I heard my mother's voice through the static, cold as Lake Ontario in February. Is she conscious? Yes? Then she can wait. Your sister just lost a $450 sponsorship, and she's absolutely devastated. Rachel will understand. 3 hours later, when my father pushed through the doors of the cardiac ICU at Toronto General and saw who was sitting in the chair beside my bed, the blood drained from his face so fast, I thought he might be the next patient. He dropped his Tim Hortons cup. The coffee pooled around his shoes. "What?" he whispered. "What is she doing here?" And that was the moment I stopped being the daughter who held everything together. Let me take you back to where this really started. My name is Rachel Whitfield. I'm 33 years old, an attending emergency physician at Toronto General Hospital, and on Tuesday, March 11th, I walked into my 12-hour night shift, the same way I had walked into every shift for the past 6 years. Quiet, caffeinated, and already exhausted before the doors closed behind me. By 8:42 that evening, I was intubating a cyclist who had been struck by an SUV on Bloor. By 10:15, I had called time of death on a 68-year-old man whose wife was still in the waiting room believing he would come home. By midnight, I had admitted 4 patients, sutured a laceration that went clear to the bone, and drunk 3 cups of the terrible coffee from the doctor's lounge. My husband, Daniel, had texted me at 11. He was in Calgary for a litigation conference, representing his firm for the rest of the week. "Miss you. Lily drew you a picture of the CN Tower. She says it's crooked, but the love is straight. Call when you can." I smiled at that message, and then I felt it. A pressure. Not sharp, not yet. Just a weight in the center of my chest, like someone had set a paperback down on my sternum and forgotten about it. I ignored it. Because that is what I do. At 1:14 in the morning, I was charting at the central station when the pressure became a crushing grip. My left arm went numb from the shoulder down. My jaw started to ache on the left side, and I remember thinking, with the strange clarity of a physician diagnosing herself, oh no. Nurse Priya Sandhu looked up from her screen, took one glance at my face, and shouted for the charge nurse. I remember sliding sideways off the stool. I remember Priya catching my head before it hit the floor. I remember her saying, Rachel, stay with me. We are getting you to cath lab right now," and then the world folded in on itself like wet paper. When I came back, I was on a gurney in the cardiac cath lab, and Dr. Marcus Tremblay, our interventional cardiologist, was leaning over me in his lead apron. "Rachel," he said, and his voice was the calm voice doctors use when they are actually terrified. "You had a STEMI. Left anterior descending. 95% blockage. We got a stent in. You're stable." But it was very close. I tried to speak. My mouth felt like wool. "Daniel," I said. "Calgary, we've called him. He's getting on the first flight back. He'll be here by noon." "My parents?" The pause was the kind of pause that tells you everything. "We called them too, Rachel. Multiple times." Here's what I learned later, because my colleagues documented every second. At 1:26 in the morning, Priya called my mother, Eleanor, the contact listed as my emergency in the hospital's staff system from 6 years ago, back when Daniel and I were only engaged, and my parents were still the closest adults in my life. My mother answered. Priya introduced herself, explained that I had suffered a heart attack, that I was being taken into emergency cardiac intervention, that the family needed to come now. My mother said, and I have the call transcribed word for word, because the hospital records all family notifications on the cardiac unit. "Is she going to die?" "No." "Then this can wait until morning. Jessica just lost her partnership with that skincare company, and she's in absolute pieces. I'm not leaving her for a panic attack." The sponsorship was $450. 450 Canadian dollars for a single Instagram post. My sister Jessica had lost it because she had only 2,100 followers, and the brand had finally figured out what I had been watching for 4 years. At 1:41, Priya called my father, Harold. Straight to voicemail. At 1:58, Dr. Tremblay himself called my mother from the cath lab while he was scrubbing in. He told her, in words that would have sent any normal parent running through snow in their pajamas, that his daughter's heart was currently starving and that she needed to get in a car right now. My mother said, "Rachel is a doctor. She knows what she's doing. We'll be there in the morning." Dr. Tremblay, who later told me this was the strangest conversation he had ever had with a patient's family member, said, "Ma'am, your daughter cannot treat herself. She is on the table." My mother said, "Jessica is having a complete breakdown. You cannot imagine the pressure she is under. Rachel always recovers. She's the strong one." And she hung up. 8 more calls were made over the next 2 hours. My father picked up once, at 3:22, and said, "We're on our way. Give us 40 minutes." They did not come. I was in the cath lab when I arrested on the table for 11 seconds. Dr. Tremblay restarted my heart with a precordial thump and 200 joules. Then he finished the stent. Daniel walked into my ICU room at 11:47 in the morning. He had taken the first WestJet flight out of Calgary, and he came straight from Pearson in the same suit he had worn to the conference dinner. His tie was crooked. His hair was wrong. His eyes were red. He sat down in the chair beside my bed, and he took my hand, the one without the IV, and he held it against his cheek, and he did not say anything for a very long time. "I'm sorry," I finally whispered. "Don't," he said. "Don't ever say sorry to me for this." He swallowed hard. "Where are your parents, Rach?" I just shook my head, because the answer was the answer I had been swallowing for my entire life, and I couldn't say it out loud yet. My parents arrived at 2:09 in the afternoon, 13 hours after the first call. My mother walked in carrying a Starbucks and wearing the camel coat I had bought her for Christmas. My father walked behind her holding his phone. Jessica trailed in last, scrolling TikTok, wearing the Canada Goose parka I had co-signed the financing for in 2022. The first thing my mother said when she saw me, lying in a hospital bed with a fresh stent in my heart and a bruise the size of a dinner plate on my chest, was, "Oh, Rachel, you look awful. Is your insurance going to cover all of this?" Not "How are you?" Not "Thank God you're alive." Not "I'm sorry." "Is your insurance going to cover it?" Daniel stood up. Very slowly. I had never seen him stand up that way. He is a corporate litigator at one of the biggest firms on Bay Street, and he has a courtroom stillness that I had only ever seen him use on opposing counsel. He said, "Eleanor, Harold, Jessica, I want all 3 of you to leave this room." My mother laughed, a nervous tinkling thing. "Daniel, darling, don't be dramatic. We drove all the way downtown in traffic. We just want to see our daughter." "You want," Daniel said, "to see if she's going to survive long enough to keep paying for things." The room went silent. My father looked at the floor. Jessica kept scrolling. My mother opened her mouth and then closed it again, because for the first time in perhaps her entire marriage, she could not think of the right lie. "Get out," I said. My voice was small and scratchy from the breathing tube. "Please, just get out." They got out. My mother paused at the door long enough to say, "We'll discuss this when you're feeling more rational, Rachel." Then they were gone. Daniel sat back down and put his head in his hands. "Rachel," he said, "I need to show you something. I wasn't going to bring this up today, but I think today is when you need to know." He pulled out his laptop. "Let me go back 8 years, because you need to understand what had been building." July 2017. I had just finished my residency at the University of Toronto. I had accepted a staff position at Toronto General. My starting salary felt like a fortune after 7 years of being a resident, scraping by on ramen and callroom coffee. My parents invited me over to their house in Etobicoke for Sunday dinner. My mother made a roast. My father poured the good red. Jessica was not there, which, in hindsight, was the first clue. Over dessert, my father slid a folder across the table. "Rachel, sweetheart," he said, "we need a small favor." Inside the folder was an application for a home equity line of credit. $240,000 against the house I had grown up in, the house they had almost paid off. My parents wanted me to co-sign. My father's business, a small contracting outfit, had taken a bad hit during a condo project that went sideways in 2016. They owed suppliers. They owed the bank. They owed Revenue Canada. They needed a lifeline, and the credit union wouldn't approve them a loan. My father said, "We'll have it paid back inside 3 years. You won't have to make a single payment. We just need your credit rating." I was 25 years old. I was tired. I loved my parents. I signed. For the first 6 months, they made the payments. Then my father's truck broke down, and they asked me to cover that month. Then the furnace went. Then my mother's car needed tires before winter. Then it was Jessica's first year at OCAD, because my sister was going to be an artist. And then Jessica dropped out of OCAD, and my parents asked me to help with her rent because she had an internship at a gallery. And then the internship ended, and Jessica moved home, and then moved out again, to live with a boyfriend in Liberty Village, and then moved home again. Somewhere in that fog of months, I became the person making the payment on the HELOC. Every month, $1,842, on the 15th of every month, automatically withdrawn from my account because my father had set it up that way just to get us over the hump. And once it was set up, nobody ever changed it back. By March of 2025, I had made 102 consecutive payments, $187,884. The HELOC balance had come down only because I had been paying it, not them. That was not the only line item. There was the e-transfer every month. $1,500. Sent to my mother on the first of every month for what she called the household envelope. There was the monthly contribution to Jessica's Creator Fund, the one I had set up in 2020 when my sister decided she was going to become a wellness influencer. $800 every month, for almost 5 years, deposited into a joint account my mother had access to, supposedly to pay for ring lights and courses and a camera. There were the emergencies, Jessica's dental work, my father's golf club membership, which he insisted was for networking, my mother's trip to Portugal with her sister in 2023, which she told me was for her mental health after a difficult winter. When Daniel turned his laptop toward me in that ICU room, he had a spreadsheet on the screen. He had been pulling my statements for 4 months. He is a litigator. He knows how to build a file. 8 years. $209,000 in direct transfers. $187,000 on the HELOC. $48,000 in one-off emergencies, which Daniel had cross-referenced against my bank records and the dates of Jessica's Instagram posts. And the correlation was so perfect it was almost funny. Every time Jessica posted a new designer handbag, an emergency request had landed in my inbox 2 days earlier. Total, over 8 years. $444,000. "Rachel," Daniel said quietly, "there's one more thing, and I need you to breathe when I tell you this, because your heart is fragile right now." He pulled up a credit report. Mine. There was an Amex in my name that I did not open. Opened in November 2023. Current balance, $31,200, almost at its limit. Daniel had requested the statements. The charges were at restaurants I had never been to, a spa in Muskoka, a flight to Cancun, and, in the most recent month, a deposit of $4,000 to an event venue in Vaughan, for something called Jessica and Brandon, the 21st of June 2025. My sister was getting married in 3 months. Nobody had told me. And she had been paying for it with a credit card fraudulently opened in my name. I closed my eyes. I felt the stent in my artery, and I thought, my family tried to kill me, and I just didn't know it yet. "Who opened it?" I whispered. "Signature on the application is your mother's handwriting," Daniel said. "With your SIN, your date of birth, and an old address from the house in Etobicoke. Rachel, this is not a family argument anymore. This is identity theft. This is a criminal matter." I opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling tiles of the Toronto General Cardiac ICU, and I said, very calmly, "I'm done." Daniel took my hand. "What do you want to do?" I want to document everything. I want every dollar, every text, every phone call from the night I nearly died. I want the Amex application. I want Jessica's Instagram DMs if we can get them. I want bank statements going back to 2017. I want receipts. I want witnesses. Okay. And I want to do it in public, Daniel. I want to do it where they cannot rewrite the story. They have been rewriting me my whole life. Not this time. He nodded once. Then he kissed my forehead and opened a new document on his laptop. Over the next 3 weeks, while I recovered at home under my husband's careful watch and my daughter Lily's careful drawings of hearts with little stents inside them, we built the file. Daniel filed a police report with Toronto Police Service, Fraud Division, on the Amex. He pulled 8 years of bank records. He got a forensic accountant from his firm to build a timeline. We discovered the joint account for Jessica's Creator Fund had not once been used for camera equipment. It had paid for a Peloton, a series of cosmetic injections at a clinic on King Street, and an $8,000 engagement ring for Brandon, whoever Brandon was. I also learned, from my Aunt Margaret, who called me sobbing when she heard I had been in the hospital, that my mother had been telling the extended family for years that I was struggling with substance abuse and drifting away from the family, and that this was why I no longer came to Christmas dinner. I had stopped going to Christmas in 2022 because the last time I went, my mother had publicly criticized me at the table for being too career-focused to give Lily a proper sibling. I had not been drifting. I had been protecting my daughter. But my mother had spun it into a story where I was the broken one, and Jessica, who had never held a job longer than 4 months, was the fragile family treasure who needed protecting from me. My Aunt Margaret sent me screenshots. My mother's Facebook, which I had blocked years ago, was a museum of invented achievements. Jessica graduating from a master's program at York that she had never attended, Jessica mentoring young women entrepreneurs through a program that did not exist, Jessica doing charity work at Sick Kids, where she had never volunteered a single hour, and me, in the occasional post, described as going through a difficult time and estranged by choice, which was a beautiful piece of language because it made my absence sound like a personality flaw instead of a survival strategy. On April 3rd, Dr. Tremblay called me at home. Rachel, the hospital is hosting its annual gala on May 10th. The board wants to honor the team that saved you. Specifically, they want to honor you for your work in the emergency department. 612 lives in the last 4 years, Rachel. That's the number. They want to give you the Clinician of the Year award. I was quiet for a moment. Marcus, I said. Yes? Is there a microphone? Of course. Why? I'd like to say a few words when I accept. Rachel. His voice changed. He had heard something in mine. What are you planning? I said. Nothing that isn't true. I just need 8 minutes and a projector. He laughed, very softly. You will have both. I mailed my parents an invitation. Cream cardstock. The Royal Ontario Museum, Saturday, May 10th, 6:30 in the evening, black tie. A handwritten note at the bottom, in my own cursive. I would love for you to be there. My mother RSVP'd within an hour. So did Jessica, who asked if there would be a photographer. Of course there would be a photographer. There would be several. The night of the gala, I wore a simple black dress that Daniel had picked out, pearl earrings that had been my grandmother's, and my hair down the way I never wore it at the hospital. Lily stood in our front hallway and told me, in her solemn 6-year-old way, "Mummy, you look like a heart surgeon princess." Daniel drove. In the car, he held my hand across the console and asked me, one more time, if I was sure. I was sure. The Ram ballroom was full. 400 people. Hospital board, staff, donors, the Toronto medical community, a journalist from the Globe and Mail who covered healthcare, and, at table 14 near the front, my mother, my father, and my sister Jessica, who was wearing a dress that I now knew had been charged to the Amex in my name. My mother waved at me across the room like we were any normal family and everything was fine. Dr. Tremblay spoke first. He told the story of a Tuesday night in March. He told it the way it actually happened. He told the room that the patient had coded on the table. He told them that 13 phone calls had been placed to family in the first 2 hours, and that a husband had flown in from Calgary, and that by the time the patient's parents arrived, she had been stable for 8 hours. He did not use my name yet. He did not use my parents' names. But my mother, at table 14, had stopped drinking her wine. My father was looking at the tablecloth. Jessica was still on her phone. Then Dr. Tremblay said, "Tonight's clinician of the year is the physician in question. She asked me to tell this story first, because she says medicine does not get to skip the uncomfortable parts. Please welcome Dr. Rachel Whitfield." The room stood up. I walked to the stage. 400 people, clapping. I counted the steps because I needed to count something. 31 steps. I took the microphone. I looked out over the ballroom and I found my family at table 14, and I smiled at them because I wanted my mother to see my face before I began. "Thank you," I said. "I am honored beyond measure. My colleagues saved my life 2 months ago, and every single day they save other people's lives, and I cannot adequately describe what it is like to be rescued by your own emergency department. But before I say anything about the work, I need to say something about the night itself. Because I promised myself, lying in that ICU, that if I lived, I would tell the truth out loud, in a room where it could not be rewritten. My parents are here tonight. So is my sister. I invited them on purpose." My mother's hand went to her throat. I clicked the remote Daniel had handed me backstage. Behind me, on the enormous screen, a timeline appeared. 13 calls. Timestamps. The response from each. "On the night I had my heart attack," I said, "my emergency department made 13 phone calls to my parents and my sister over a span of 2 hours and 24 minutes. My mother answered the first call and told the nurse, and I am quoting her directly, 'Is she going to die? No? Then this can wait.' My sister had just lost a $450 sponsorship with a skincare company. My mother decided that was the emergency that deserved her attention." Gasps moved through the room like wind over water. I clicked again. "Over the last 8 years, I have transferred my parents and my sister $444,000. The slide showed the breakdown: bank transfers, HELOC payments, the Creator Fund, the so-called emergencies. I co-signed a home equity line of credit for my parents in 2017. I have personally paid $187,884 on that loan. They have paid nothing. The loan is still in my name." Jessica finally looked up from her phone. My father's hands were shaking. I clicked again. Screenshots of my mother's Facebook posts. The imaginary masters at York. The fictional volunteering at Sick Kids. The line where I was described as going through a difficult time. I read each one aloud. I let each one hang in the air. "None of these are true," I said. "My sister did not attend York. She has never volunteered at Sick Kids. I have not been going through a difficult time. I have been working 12-hour shifts in an emergency department and raising a daughter and paying the mortgage on a house I grew up in." The story my mother told the family is a story designed to hide what was actually happening, which is that I was being quietly drained while my sister was being quietly indulged. I clicked one more time. The Amex application appeared on screen. My name at the top. My mother's handwriting in the signature line. I had redacted my SIN, because I am still a doctor and I know about privacy, but the handwriting was unmistakable. "This is a credit card that was opened in my name, without my knowledge or consent, in November 2023. It currently carries a balance of over $31,000. The charges include a wedding deposit for my sister's upcoming marriage, which nobody told me was happening. This is not a family disagreement. This is a criminal code offense under Section 403. Toronto Police Fraud Division has been notified. A report was filed on March 29th. I am telling you all of this in public because I have spent my entire life being told, by the people who did this to me, that I was the problem, that I was cold, that I was selfish, that I had drifted away from my family. Tonight I would like the record to show that I did not drift. I was pushed. And the people who pushed me are sitting at table 14. The ballroom was absolutely silent. My mother was crying. My father was staring at his hands. Jessica had put her phone down for the first time all evening. I took a breath. My chest still ached where the stent was. Good. It reminded me I was alive. I am not telling you this to humiliate them, I said. And this was the only part that was not entirely true, because part of me did want exactly that. I am telling you because there are people in this room, in this city, who are being slowly bled by the families they were born into, and who believe they have no choice. You have a choice. You have always had a choice. I just forgot I did for a very long time. I looked at Daniel at the table right below the stage. He was crying too, but smiling. Lily was with her grandmother, my mother-in-law, at home, watching a movie, and I was so grateful in that moment that my daughter had one grandmother who had never asked her for anything. I would like to end with this, I said. I am establishing, with the matching support announced tonight, by the Hospital Foundation, the Whitfield Emergency Medicine Bursary, to support medical students from immigrant and working-class families in Ontario. $200,000, over 10 years. Because I know what it is like to feel you owe your family, your entire self. I want to help young doctors build lives where they do not have to choose between their patients and their own survival. Thank you. The ballroom rose. 400 people. I walked off the stage, and Daniel met me at the bottom and held me up, because my legs had gone, finally, at the very end. Behind us, I heard my mother stand and shout, "This is slander, Rachel, this is slander. You will hear from our lawyer," and I heard Dr. Tremblay, who had taken the microphone back, say very mildly into it, "Ma'am, truth with documentation is never slander. Please take your seat or security will assist you." They did not take their seats. They left. Jessica tripped on the hem of her fraudulent dress on the way out of the ballroom, and I am not proud of how satisfying I found that. The Globe and Mail journalist emailed me at 11 that night. By Tuesday, the Hospital Foundation had received over $300,000 in donations to the bursary from people who had watched the speech online, because of course the gala had been filmed, and of course I had cleared the footage for release. By the following Friday, Toronto police had interviewed my mother. By the end of May, the Amex had been formally charged as fraud. By June, my parents' lawyer had called Daniel and offered to settle the HELOC by transferring the deed of the Etobicoke house to me. Daniel told them no. Daniel told them the bank had already removed me as co-signer on the basis of the fraud file, and that the house and its mortgage were now entirely their problem. Jessica's wedding did not happen. Brandon, it turned out, had not known about the Amex either. He left her in July. My mother sent me a letter in August. 6 pages, handwritten. It was not an apology. It was a defense. She explained that she had always been the one holding the family together, that I had been born strong, and Jessica had been born fragile, and that a mother's job was to protect the fragile one, that the money had been redistribution, not theft, that I had never understood how much pressure she had been under. I read the letter once. I put it in a file folder labeled documentation. I did not write back. I see a therapist every Wednesday now. She uses the word enmeshment a lot. I am learning what it means. Lily turned 7 in October. We had a small party at the house. Daniel made a cake shaped like a dinosaur, because she is obsessed with dinosaurs. Her friends came. Her other grandmother came, Daniel's mum, who brought a card and a hug and nothing else asked of anyone. At one point in the afternoon, Lily sat on my lap and asked me, with the casual bluntness of a child, "Mummy, how come we never see your mum and dad anymore?" I thought about how to answer. I thought about it for a long time. And I said, "Because sometimes, my love, the people you come from aren't the people who are good for you. And that's sad, but it is also okay. Because the people who are good for you are right here." She considered this seriously, because she considers everything seriously, and then she said, "Like Daddy and me, like Daddy and you, and Dr. Priya, and Dr. Marcus." Yes. Good, she said. Then she went back to her dinosaur cake. I kept the scar where they put in the stent. It is small. A little silver line on the inside of my wrist from the catheter site. I look at it sometimes when I am charting at the hospital, when the overhead pages blur together and the coffee has gone cold. I look at it, and I think about the night my family chose a $450 sponsorship over my heart. And then I think about the next patient on my list, and I go do my job, because that is who I am. I am a doctor. I save people. I just finally learned that saving people does not mean letting them take everything. It means knowing, at the end of the shift, when to go home. And knowing, when you walk in the door, who is actually waiting for you there. Daniel is waiting. Lily is waiting. That is a whole family. That is enough. That is, in fact, everything.